All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a psychological theory that's going to flip how you think about well-being right on its head. It's called positive disintegration, and believe me, the core idea is pretty radical.
I want you to think about this for a second. What if all those things we spend our lives trying to avoid, anxiety, inner conflict, even depression, what if they weren't actually signs that something's wrong, but were actually the very engine of our personal growth? That single question is what we're going to unpack today.
So who came up with this wild idea? His name was Kazimierz Dabrowski, a Polish psychiatrist. He was working back in the mid-20th century, pretty much cut off from Western psychology, and he came up with this completely unique perspective, that all that psychological turmoil wasn't something to be stamped out or cured, but was actually essential to becoming a fully developed human being.
And this right here, this is the core of his whole theory. Dabrowski really pushed back against the habit of slapping an illness label on every bit of psychological struggle. He truly believed that for a personality to get any real depth, it has to go through these periods of inner turmoil. It's kind of like the friction that creates the pearl.
Okay, so to really get this, Dabrowski says you have to understand that, in his view, people basically start out on one of two different paths. And these paths lead to totally different places.
So you've got these two starkly different starting points. On one side, you have primitive integration. Think of it like a solid brick wall. Super stable, super rigid, no real inner conflict, but also no ability to change or grow. On the other side, you have someone with the potential for disintegration. This personality is more like a seedling. It's plastic, sensitive, maybe a little restless. This is the person who has the capacity for real development. And Dabrowski even called this type psychoneurotic, not because they were sick, but because they were uniquely wired for growth.
All right, so let's say you're on that second path. You've got that plastic personality, that potential. How does the actual growth happen? Well, it all comes down to this process of disintegration itself.
So disintegration, I know, it sounds pretty scary, right? But Dabrowski saw it as this loosening of structures. It's that feeling when everything seems to be falling apart, when you're in conflict with yourself and the world. But, and this is the key, he didn't see it as destruction, it's more like plowing a field. Yeah, you have to break up the hard ground, but that's the only way anything new can ever grow.
But here's a really crucial distinction. Not all crises are the same. Dabrowski pointed out there are two totally different kinds. First, there's unilevel crisis. It's horizontal. It's like being stuck on a seesaw, just going back and forth between two equal poles, like, I want this, but I also want that. You never really go anywhere. But multi-level disintegration is vertical. It's a climb. This is when you feel a conflict between a lower version of yourself and a higher version you can imagine. That's the conflict that actually powers real growth.
Okay, so if that multi-level upward climb is the engine for growth, what's the fuel? What are the actual feelings that push us up that ladder?
And this, for me, is where things get really mind-bending. Dabrowski basically takes our whole idea of negative emotions and flips it. He says stuff like disquietude, that nagging feeling that you could be more, or guilt, that discomfort with your own actions. They aren't problems, they're tools. Inferiority toward oneself is huge here. It's not about feeling worse than other people. It's about feeling that you haven't lived up to the person you know you could be. And the whole thing is guided by this incredible human capacity he called the subject-object process, the ability to just step back and look at yourself honestly.
I mean, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? A feeling like guilt isn't some bug that needs fixing. It's an indispensable factor. It's what creates the creative tension we need to basically teach ourselves how to be better. It's the very friction that forces us to evolve.
Now, it's easy to think this whole process is just something that happens to you, right? Like you're just along for the ride. But Dabrowski said no way. He argued that there's a powerful force inside us that lets us grab the steering wheel and direct our own growth.
He gave it a name, the third factor. He said that we have our genetics, that's the first factor. We have our environment, that's the second factor. But then there's this third autonomous force. It's the conscious part of you that looks at everything, your impulses, your values, the world around you, and decides, this is who I want to be. It's your inner architect.
So you see how this works? You've got your genes, what you're born with. You've got your environment, everything that happens to you. But then there's this third thing. This is what you choose to become. We're not just a product of our nature and nurture.
We actually get to be agents in our own creation.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. When you look at all these pieces, what you're left with is a completely different way of thinking about what it even means to be mentally healthy.
And here it is, Dabrowski's big, final reframe. Mental health is not some static state of feeling good all the time. It's not the absence of problems. It's a dynamic process. It's the ongoing progressive development towards the person you aspire to be. Health isn't a destination you arrive at. It's the ability to keep climbing.
And this leads to a pretty shocking conclusion if you think about it. From this perspective, that person with primitive integration, the one who's perfectly adjusted, has no inner conflict, no anxiety, they're actually in a state contrary to mental health. Because if health is development, then the absence of development is the absence of health.
So what are we left with? It's really a question for you to take with you. Instead of looking at our struggles and crises as failures or something to be ashamed of, we're invited to see them as potential. To ask ourselves, what crisis in my life right now isn't just a problem to be fixed, but could be the very beginning of my greatest growth?